So hello and welcome back, guys, to another Improvement Season podcast. It's me, Pascal, and on the other end, it is Steve Hall. We are always confused whose turn it is to introduce the episode, and then it's always kind of a back and forth. Okay, this time it wasn't back and forth, but this time it was me. Guys, hello. Hope you guys are doing well, and I really do hope that Steve is doing well. And I was already complimenting Steve on his arms, that they are slowly popping out. Just look at that. I mean, for the listeners, you can't see that, but it looks very, very, very good. Very muscular. The shape is coming. It doesn't look like a natty anymore. That's good.
It's, yeah, when you get people accusing you of not being natural, you know you've made it as a natural.
Yeah.
But it still blows my mind how certain people are that natural bodybuilding is a myth. No one's natural. And I'm just like, are you serious? Come on.
The only accusation I've received so far is due to my fatty nipples.
Oh, come on.
And pubertic gyno, and the loose skin around the chest that I'm using steroids because of that. Yeah, unfortunately, that is just fat and having loose skin and yeah.
People
not having the golden ticket.
The smallest thing. It's just ridiculous. Like how ignorant people are to different body shapes and the potential muscle growth you can even get. I don't know. It's a bit crazy.
That was my natty or not story. That people accused me not because I was so shredded or muscular, but just because I was fat and had have very, very sticky and pointy chest. Oh man, that's sad.
Your time will come. It's just waiting.
Yeah. Don't know. Maybe as a 40 or 50-year-old or so, something like that. Maybe
when you get
becoming
stage shredded.
Yeah, and maybe I'm becoming one of those old dudes, right? That you see sometimes over on Instagram, the guys with the white beards and stuff in their 50s and being absolutely nice and shredded. I doubt that, but who knows, right? Who knows? Still a little bit long way to go. So, yeah, in 20 years, a lot can happen.
I saw the latest one. I think I've had two on Reddit where people have put up photos of me, which is not very many. But the most recent one, I think I might have even shown you it or told you about it. And like someone commented being like, lol, have you seen him in real life? He's definitely natty. I was just like, I don't know whether thanks for, no, that's definitely a diss. Completely a diss. Yeah. I was like, great. Okay. You're a, yeah, whatever. But I'm trying to,
Sorry. Z has just sent me a picture of Coach Kendall, WMBF world champion. And man, this guy, I even just replied to him and said, man, he got the golden lottery ticket when it comes to genetics. He's one of those natty guys that if he were to go on juice, such as Jared, he would just blow up and even be then competitive in the enhanced realm, massively competitive, such as Jared. Basically, he's a great example for that. He looked amazing, was actually on the pro stage as a natty, and then transitioned over, and now is killing it as an enhanced pro as well.
Yeah, Kendall just has those, he's just got his muscles just are like balloons, and it's just tiny waist, tiny shape. Joints.
Yeah. The ab alignment is perfect, so symmetrical. Yeah. The delts, it's just like small footballs coming out. Speaking of football, Steve, last week we've asked the question already, and this week I will ask it again. Is football coming home?
I would say odds are not on England for the final short. Italy, I think, have a better track record. But I think they haven't lost a game in 35 games or so. Oh, really? Did they have that statistic? That's mad.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's exciting. I don't care. It was just last night's game was mega exciting. So,
yeah,
I'm not, like you said, like I said last time, I'm not oh yeah, if England win, that means I've won. I had no part in it. It's just fun to know that the team that's your team due to birth is doing well, and it's fun. So yeah, it was a fun game actually.
Yeah, I haven't seen any kind of games live yet. and I won't even do it with the finals. But I just find it funny because, of course, there's a connection then to the UK and thus also then England, and that's why it's just like, yeah, is football coming home? That's the question
late for
everyone
you,
is asking. Huh?
It's like 9 p.m. the final, and like the games are like late as it is.
Could
They're like
be.
8 p.m. here,
I
so
have
it's 9
even
p.m.
no idea when the games are on, to be honest.
Yeah, it will be 9 p.m.
It's so funny because it has completely changed over the past years, as you know, and you even asked it at one point, like, what is up with me in football? Because just years back, I was even a founder of a football fan club of Borussia Dortmund. And I'm not following football at all anymore. And I think COVID, of course, played into that massively as well, because the games during COVID time, they were just so freaking boring. And I never imagined how much of an impact the fans and the chanting and all that kind of stuff had on the games. And now, so during COVID times, it was just every single game felt like a test game. And I was so unexcited. And that's why it just lost a little bit touch with it, and thus also a little bit of love for it.
I didn't watch. I don't think I've seen any COVID games, so I literally haven't watched a match for the longest time. And it's just whenever like the Euros come on or the World Cup comes on, I end up watching a bit because I think Charlotte gets into it, and that's where it spurs from. Yeah. But it's fun. I imagine like it being really fun, actually, like having a team to support and it being quite exciting. Like I could see myself getting into it. It's just a big time commitment. Yeah. Not watching it, like watching it on TV isn't that big a deal. Like it's an hour and a half or whatever. So it's not that long. But watching it live, like going to matches, like you used to go to live matches, right? Like that's half a day gone.
I think that was also one of the reasons why I actually distanced myself from it, because that was kind of the best part about it, meeting up with mates, going to games, but there was so much time consumption there, and I'm not drinking any kind of alcohol. The others got pissed, and I was just like there, right? And there was this one match I remember because it was so freaking cool. Borussia Dortmund was in the Champions League. I think it was either the quarterfinals or half finals, like, what is it now, 5 or 6 years ago. We were in Borussia Dortmund. It was the second game where Real Madrid was coming to Dortmund. And we had to, I think, score like 3 or 4 goals to actually then get into the next round. And Borussia Dortmund, and the odds were, of course, then not in our favor, right? And in the first half, they already scored like 2 games, and the entire stadium was on fire. I even get goosebumps now talking about it, because it was the craziest atmosphere I've ever experienced, right? We didn't end up making it, but the atmosphere was just like 90 minutes straight, like firing them up. And you could feel that something was in the air, but it didn't really end up being successful. But that was crazy. And there, it was in the midst, of course, because it's Champions League, it was on a Wednesday. So we traveled to Dortmund, which is on the other side of Germany, traveled there by car, and then we had to get back to then also make it back to work next day again. So we had to then get in the car after the match, drive home, which is kind of a 4.5 hour ride from 4.5 hour to 5 hour ride from Dortmund after Champions League match, which it lasts up until like 10 p.m. or so. So we arrived in the midst of the night, got to bed, 3 hours of sleep, then off to the office, right? And just imagine something like that on a regular basis is just unfeasible.
Absolutely. Like it sounds appealing, but also incredibly like, oh my God. Like I'm even looking at on Sunday, that's the final at 8. And we've been invited to go around Charlotte's Friends, which is like an hour or so away. And I'm already thinking, oh man, so if the game ends, maybe it ends at like 10, maybe we can get away by 10. Oh, I'm going to be home at like 11, 11:30. Maybe it's midnight. Oh man, my sleep's going to be impacted. Yeah. And actually, no, I am training the next day. So, and I'm in prep and I'm like, oh, do I want to do this? And I'll do it. I mean, that's not anywhere near the level you described there, but I think that's why I dropped out of football, because it was just a case of, it was taking too much of my time. And I just went like all into bodybuilding and that lifestyle, which in some ways, I miss some of it, but I think it's enough. I I don't like not being good at things. And I know if I was doing too many different things, I just wouldn't be very good at any of it.
Yeah.
So I like that I can be selfish with my time with bodybuilding and just drive everything in that direction. I think probably a lot of people have gone through a similar thing.
Yeah, and I mean, times change, right? You mature. I'm not saying that you're immature when you are still following something like that, but your interests, they just change. And I have to really say that I have turned into the version that I always despised when I was young. Like a boring old fuck who likes to stay at home, likes to go into the forest on a Sunday, just walking around, stuff like that, right? Going to bed early. And back then, that was something that I could never have imagined to turn into something like this. And now I really do enjoy that, to be honest. Now having a house, having kids at home. But yeah, speaking of training and all, how are things going on your end now that you're deeper in prep and all that kind of stuff? How are you feeling?
So pretty good, to be honest. Like most things are holding. So I'm repeating the performance based off my first mesocycle that I ran. So like my last mesocycle, I'm basically repeat performance. So I'm not, that's fine with me. Like I'm not gaining like ground, but I'm not falling back. Why am I? But I'm a lot lighter. And I'm in a calorie deficit. So I'm not in a place for performances to be its best. So I'm pretty happy. There are a few things where you probably get this, Pascal. I hope I'm not the only one, but I imagine you get this where you have a movement, you're progressing it. You get to a point where I describe this kind of like acceptable form, and you get to this end point where you're progressing it, but at maybe the detriment of form a little bit on occasion. And you just get to that point where you're on that cusp of acceptable form. You look to progress it and you're just like, no, I can't. So I need to take a step back. And that's happening with like my bent over rows was a pure example yesterday. It was just like that. I just had the set. I was like, that was not acceptable, Steve. You need to do better. And I'm getting that with a few movements. And it's just playing on my mind where I'm like, oh, am I losing strength? And I know it's actually not that. It is like, it's just my trying to be progressive when I'm in a state of progression is difficult during this stage. I'm not in off season where I can normally get through that, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. So what it is that you're trying to do on a repetitive basis and maybe on a weekly basis is still to add some variables, something like the least or the most minimal thing of like adding a repetition. Yeah. But in reality, because you're losing body weight at the same time, that is an unfeasible task overall. Like normally in like a typical mesocycle in my off season, I would be adding a rep or adding some load. Yeah. And my RAR would normally drop by 1 or maintain. Whereas now, in some instances, to just do last week's performance, my RAR might have to drop or I might have to maintain my RAR. Not often the former of that, thankfully, because that's kind of like an actual performance drop. But yeah, it's more of a case of just work with the same load potentially each week, get a rep out every other week, maybe progression will start coming that way. And that might be how I go about things in my next mesocycle, is like rather than look to progress each week by rep or something from a baseline of 3 to 4 RAR, just look to progress every other week, because progression is just going to slow down and the fatigue's building up. Performance is obviously not going to be in the same place, and my adaptability is way down. It's just unrealistic, especially as I'm getting towards like maybe around 10% body fat at the moment, somewhere around there, I would have thought. I can see, though, that it's challenging because you've been in an off season for such a long time. You got used to adding something over such a long period of time. I have the feeling that when we are staying away from a caloric deficit and really commit to gaining and cutting phases, that we sometimes forget what it feels like and what it's like to be then in a gaining phase when we have been in a cutting phase for so long, and vice versa. And when you're then always adding something, and then all of a sudden you're stalling on paper, basically, or you're still trying to push it, we tend to forget that we're still making progress, because in and for itself, you're becoming a lighter individual on a weekly basis. So if the numbers on your spreadsheets stay the same, so in regards to the training, you are making progress because you're a lighter individual who's doing the same performance such as your heavier individual. But because we never have the scale weight most of the time in the training spreadsheet, we have kind of a disconnect to both of those variables. And then it feels like we're not making any kind of progress, when in reality, that is still, I think, great progress in and for itself. And even if it were to decline slightly, which will be a thing over time, when you've lost like 5 kilograms, 10 kilograms, it will be absolutely expected that you are going to see some decline, because otherwise we could just everyone could gain up to 130 kilograms body weight. Then we have gotten very, very strong and then cut down, but maintained that same performance. Of course, that's unrealistic.
Yeah, so I think I might have mentioned it last time, but I guess I'll say it this time at least. 180 pounds, I think, in and around that body fat where I am now, every bit I go under here, that's where these things are going to be more likely, where I am going to have to be like, let loads come down potentially, which will feel wrong. But like you mentioned there, I'm going to be way lighter. Like my off season was over 200 pounds. If I now like over 20 pounds down is unrealistic to maintain that performance. So, and then like just days where I'm going to have fatigue and hunger, they're going to be more likely to accrue. And so, yeah, it will happen, but that's part of the process. And weirdly, when you have those days, assuming you set things up well, you're having good sleep, your nutritional timing, like you have all your variables in place, and you still feel like a bit run down, that's when you know these are the days I'm digging off body fat, and let's get through this, because that's kind of my silver lining, where the days I feel like shit, that's the ones that I'm making the most progress. So let's really get through it, and there'll be better days to come. So, yeah.
Steve, how would you go about it? So you're feeling a little bit beat up and run down already by the entirety of the prep, let's say, and you feel that the recovery is impacted by a long shot. Would you then make significant adjustments to the program, or would you just accept the situation, accept that you are in a contest prep environment and that it's just part of the game? Or would you make up for it in maybe going from something like, I don't know, 6 times per week down to 5 times per week of training only?
It's a good question, because like it's that old debate of like, should training volume come down during a dieting phase, or some people argue maybe it comes up. And I think the reality is training is the other side to the coin of muscle protein synthesis along with nutrition. When you're in a deficit, the likelihood as muscle protein breakdown is going to be quite high, and you're trying to, as best as you can, keep MPS as high as possible through protein and protein dosing, but there's only so much you can do. So training and then training volume is the key there, but you've got recoverability on the other side. And so if you're trying to do more than you can recover from, then that's no good. But you don't want to go so low in volume that now you're providing insufficient magnitude of like muscle protein synthesis through your training. So it is that kind of, for me, my average training volume has already come down a lot, and it will probably continue to come down, but there's like a minimum threshold that I probably don't want to see it come below. So that, I guess, is my answer there. So I think more and more my volume is going to become static from week 1, and I might reduce the amount that I'm doing for things like at the moment, I'm still training forearms, I'm still training traps, I'm still training rear delts, like plenty. I can start getting rid of that fluff, so I can just focus in on the stuff that matters most and provides the biggest bang per buck. I think that's probably what I do, but I try and hold on to volume, at least my minimum kind of start baseline volume, as much as I can, and keep it static more so.
Fast, efficient fat loss. Does that sound like music to your ears? The mini cut movement might just be for you. Mini cuts are like robbing the fat bank. You want to get in and out with as much fat as possible. In a short period of time, you could easily look to lose 6 to 12 pounds of fat. The mini cut movement is excellent. There's group support for extra accountability and also expert help within the group. We have educational videos to keep you on track along the way, and you get all your nutrition and training customized and individualized for you. So if that sounds of interest, get involved with the mini cut movement.
You brought up a good point about like forearm stuff and maybe something like traps, calves, ab work and stuff like that. I think that everything has, of course, a cost to it, and especially in a cutting phase, it comes with accumulated fatigue. Most of the time, much more than, of course, in a gaining phase as well. Now, I've had it a couple of times that athletes then complain or raised their concern about losing muscle mass around a specific body part. That is something like calves or something like forearms or whatever, right? These muscle groups that don't have a lot of direct volume towards it, because we're not training them like 3-4 times out of the week directly. And even if we're working them directly, it's most of the time very minimum sets, right? Because they still get such a huge crossover effect from other exercises. If you were to throw something like that out, would you run, or would you be concerned about something like atrophy or so?
It's a good question, because I already question whether or not I want to be bothered to train them, because it's more of like if you want to be more sure that you're going to maintain the muscle mass there, train them directly. But I'd still be quite confident you'd maintain virtue on that muscle mass through your main compound lifts, unless you're doing like a lot of people have moved to like machine-based movements and like more and more isolation work. So they're not doing like bent over rows, and they're not doing squats, and they're not doing like these big compound lifts. And so they are more and more isolating muscles. So then they're not really hitting some of these things indirectly. Those people might be at more risk, but we tend to favor those big compound lifts. So I think a lot of like our clients, like I would be like, dude, if it's stressing you out, if it's fatiguing you doing like a bunch of calf work or like abs and forearms, and if it's a big relief, I think you'll more than make up for it through the compound work generally. In a contest prep, as you're getting really lean, I don't know, like it's not something that I have a good answer to. I'd say you could do some for security, but at the end of the day, is it worth the time and the fatigue and the just annoyance of doing that at a time where your resources are so run thin? Like you're having to put time in posing and potentially doing like a posing routine, and that's more important to me. I prefer you spending half an hour doing your posing each week than half an hour doing your forearms or some shit like that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I totally agree with you there. I think before you then, because we talked about now whether you would reduce the total amount of sets maybe for your entire workload, before I were to draw away from those more important muscle groups that are also then heavier compound lifts, I would probably rather reduce direct ab work, direct calf work, unless it's very much a lagging body part, of course.
Yeah.
But I think instead of wasting energy and effort in those exercises, I think you will still get more bang for your buck from those more important ones. Because let's be real here, what probably counts more is the width and the thickness of your back. Instead of that, let it be like a couple of millimeters of thickness in your calves, which is then barely detectable of whether they have gotten a little bit smaller or not. I think that if you can maintain those, the illusion is much more important than some of the, maybe the width, maybe the thickness or so. Like let's take the abs, for example. If they look that they are popping out, totally fine. But if they are or have shrunken a little bit in the way that they pop out from the side, doesn't really matter, right? But you can definitely see the width then of the back when you're doing the lat, flaring the lats or so. I think that's way more important. And I think that you brought up a good thought there of maybe then throwing them out rather than reducing the volume maybe on those heavier compound lifts.
Yeah, I'd like to hold that volume as best as I can, at least the baseline, like it's our like starting volume of like a mesocycle. And a lot of people like in contest prep, your sleep often goes to shit anyway, but I think some people just let it go and they end up under prioritizing that sort of thing. And if you just, in every which way, I want to hold on to this volume because that is driving like the signal for muscle growth. So rather than decreasing that side, try and increase the recovery side as much as possible. Because people just don't always make the best choices, even though you think they should be.
Do you think that the evidence-based community is guilty of not focusing enough on something like recovery and fatigue management? I'm asking because last week we've talked about be a little bit more like a bro. And I know that the bros very much put a lot of emphasis on recovery. I still remember the mantra, and that was before I actually even got into lifting. I knew that bodybuilders were saying like, okay, on rest days you're growing, so very much respect the rest days and all that kind of stuff, right? So And now the evidence-based realm, and I could be absolutely in our own small echo chamber here, that only our small niche is guilty of that. I see it very often, and we are guilty of it to some extent ourselves, because we are training, or you are training right now twice daily and stuff. That are we guilty of not recovering as much as we could and putting more emphasis on that? What do you think?
I don't know. It's interesting because when I think about at least the way we train and the way we train a lot of our clients, at least we have the volume landmarks in mind, and they are foremost based around recovery. Like it's max recoverable volume, like it has it in the name. So people should be focused on recovery. But I think quite often out of that, they focus on max volume and they don't focus on the recoverable part before that. And so, yeah, they do think, oh, more is better. It's kind of draws that mindset. When people get drawn into like evidence-based training, they see volume, prime driver for hypertrophy. They're like, yeah, more. And it's like, yeah, but to the point you can recover from it. And if you can recover better, then you can actually do more. But if you just try and do more, and you don't focus on any of the recovery aspect, yeah, I think people can get hurt quickly that way, and just spin their wheels because they're just like constantly like under recovered for sessions. So it's something that comes with, I think people come into it and then they learn, oh, I can't just do more, and they draw back. They focus more on quality, and then I think they tend to get into a better position. At least that's my hope. That's how I transition quite a lot of people like that.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of ways thinking and looking at it, because you have to give props to the bros, because there are so many people who just go in there, lift hard, and then eat bro-ish, but also live by the mantra of then recovering, and they see tremendous gains, right? And then you have our small niche where that is often not the case. Is it now due to us doing too much, or is it because we are the ones who haven't seen any kind of success with a former approach that we then went down the rabbit hole and educating ourselves? And that's why we are here at this point now. And that's why we are doing what it is that we are doing right now. And I don't have a good answer for that. I'm here. I can say for I can say myself that I'm here because I was curious, but also because I didn't see the results that I would wanted to with the approaches that were preached in the past. And that was like training hard, going to failure, all that kind of stuff. And then I was living by that. And unfortunately, that didn't work out that well. Got even hurt with my hips and all that kind of stuff. There's probably a little bit of a correlation there. I wouldn't say that it's definitely due to that. A lot is probably also contributed to the way that I was lifting in the past. So the technique, the execution. But I like to think that I did take care of my recovery, but I don't know. So it's still, I'm still not certain.
It's a really good point, because I think I had the train hard aspect pretty well down when I got into lifting, because that's what it was like, train hard or go home. I literally had a t-shirt that had that on it. Like, I had that t-shirt, and I've got my slap tear as well, which again, partly down to lifting like an asshole probably. So I have my shoulder injury to call for it, partly. But my focus on recovery has never been greater than it has for the last 2-3 years. Like more and more I'm focusing on like sleep and those aspect, nutrient timing, like having downtime. I think you just, as a lifter, you mature. I think as you age, you have to focus more on those things. And then as you mature as a lifter, you also realize the importance of that. Whereas when you're younger, you're just like, it is that go hard or go home mentality, and it gets you to a certain point. And then that's when you have to get smart with things. And I think actually that's where recovery plays an even bigger role. So yeah, hopefully I'd be interested to hear what the audience think, whether or not they have that. I also, one other point is just, unfortunately, I end up working with, I think it's partly down to my background, just clients who have that kind of adipose phobia, that fat phobia. And so they look at rest days and they're like, oh, if I'm not training, I haven't earned my food. And so I need to do more activity or whatever. They do more steps. And I'm just like, dude, rest days are the days you grow, growing days, whatever. And I wish some of them would have that mentality, but I can see, because I've been there, it's hard. Like you want to do more and you want to earn that food and the right to eat and stuff. And it's a difficult circle to get out, but that's not really evidence-based people so much. It's just maybe hard gainers or hard gainers.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And it's so funny when it comes to those educational routes, or you're trying to be a mentor and also educator at the same time, and also, of course, a teammate when it comes to being a coach. And so many people, you said it yourself, you're working with a specific audience because you just simply attract them. Or maybe it is that they are sharing those things because they know that you went through the same thing. So maybe it's just because of that, it seems like you're attracting those people. But maybe they are also going to other people without telling them about these kind of things, right? Or there's not really that connection. And that's why they aren't bringing it up. At least for me personally, and whenever athletes bring something up that I went through myself, and they are at a point where I was in the past, maybe like 4 years back or so, right? I know, I'm always like, take a look at me. I know how it's done. I know how you can get out of that situation. And of course, that's a little bit of a black and white thinking, because only because I did it and only because my method worked for me doesn't mean that it will work for the athletes as well. But I'm always like, if only I had everything written down and you just need to follow those instructions and you will be there in a much shorter time than I needed to go through in years of building that experience. And also, for example, with now the binge eating last week, we've talked about like eating behaviors. And funny enough, I was just talking to Katie here today because right now I'm in a cutting phase, and for myself, I was doing like a soup for lunch. Thing is though, back then I was probably creating like double the size of the meal that I was eating here today. And I was just like, I don't know what changed about or when things changed for me, but I'm eating now so much more maturely, in my opinion. It's not that the portion sizes are just like crazy where everyone else would give you some kind of weird looks or always have a comment on their lips. Right now, it was a reasonable portion. And I was satisfied. I was even having issues finishing the entire thing. But that took me, I think, like now 2, 3, maybe even 4 years to get there. And I would just love for my athletes that I have some kind of recipe just to give them of like, do this and you will be there in just a matter of no time. Unfortunately, we both know that there's no real recipe like that. Most of the time, people just have to do those things and have to go through them themselves to then be able to get to a specific outcome. It's the same when it comes to kids, for example. So funny, we are always giving our knowledge down to the next generation, those very, very complex things that are, I don't know, physics and stuff like that. But the very, the super simplistic things that every human being is going through, like the first love, the first time you're very much despaired because your heart got broken. Right? You can tell your kids, like, this is going to happen at some point. This is what you should expect, etc., etc. And everyone is doing those same things and have to go through them themselves. And it's so funny because why? Everyone went through it. Can't we just give it to the next generation? And unfortunately, that's not what it is. And you can only be kind of a guide through the entire period for your athletes and stand by them when they are going through it and calm them down and be like, this is normal. This is something maybe you have to go through in order to then come out a little bit stronger.
I have an interesting question for you, Pascal. I think at least this is interesting. So I think we can probably say this live. I think Jess will be all right with it. So Jess is currently in contest prep, and I was like, her scale had been a bit sticky. We're digging quite hard with calories. She's bloated now and then. And I was just like, out of interest, Jess, because she tracks her fiber in the spreadsheet, but it's not right because MyFitnessPal, some of the things she's tracking doesn't have the right numbers. So I was just, Jess, can you just give me your actual fiber intake? So bear in mind, I think her calories are maybe somewhere around 1,400 at the moment. So not very high carb. And her fiber was 56 grams, which to me seemed very high. And I was thinking, my initial thought was probably should reduce that slightly. And then she came back and she's like, I'll be really hungry if I do that. Can't I just go through the bloating and everything and just be aware of that? And then I was like, I can't really think of a good reason why. Like, having high fiber and bloating shouldn't stop the fat loss. So if you can have that whilst being satiated, is there a problem? Because you brought up like having half the size of soup. And I was thinking, personally, I feel much better when I make my oats. I don't spend fucking half an hour trying to make them as big as possible. I just make them, they're quite thick. I don't care. I don't need to make them as big as possible. I don't need to volumize everything. And I feel better about that. But I don't know if, is there a problem with your fiber going to that high of an extent? Is it going to stop progress? Is it going to cause problems down the line? I couldn't think of a good reason. So I was just like, Jess, okay. Like, I actually can't think of a good reason why we can't bring this fiber down, or why we have to bring it down. It just, something inherently feels like that feels extreme. It feels a bit excessive. I feel like you should bring it down. That was just my innate feeling about it. I don't know if you have any thoughts.
Hey, Pascal here. I just quickly wanted to remind you of our online coaching service. At Revive Stronger, we put a huge emphasis on the personal aspect of our coaching. And if you want to take your physique and knowledge to the next level, hit the link in the description below.
I mean, I have thoughts, but I don't know whether it's justified to really bring it up, because it could give some false impressions or ideas into other people's minds or heads. So take it with a lot of grain of salt, the things that I'm saying now. Of course, in the context of contest prep, it's a little bit different. Otherwise, we know that too high of a fiber intake could impair some of the vitamin and mineral uptake in the gut, and that's something that we don't want to chase. And of course, it doesn't feel great. I know it because back in 2017, when I was doing evening school and the contest prep, throughout the entire day, I was eating so much fiber and so much just gassy things, right? Things that make you gassy, like lots of vegetables, raw onions. Don't do that, by the way. And then by the end of the day, when I was supposed to go to evening school, I felt terrible, because I had stomach cramps. So bad. And that was nearly a recurring theme on a daily basis. And I kid you not, I often went to the evening school, sat there, went out of the classroom, went to the toilet only to fart because it was so painful already.
Oh, I know it.
And that's not a good feeling overall. The reason why I did it was because I was perhaps already too much in a deprived state. So I was probably chronically dieting before that. I wasn't entirely ready for a cutting phase. And now looking back, I clearly realized that. And because of that, the negative adaptations of dieting kicked in much harder and much earlier than we would actually like to. And that made it so much harder on myself to accept and embrace hunger. So whenever hunger arose, I was like, shit, I need to suppress it to some extent. I need to figure out a way to suppress it. So I was then starting to abuse fiber or fibrous foods that most of the time are also high in volume. But I think by the end of the day, because I felt the way that I did, it then perhaps led to long-term consequences. Maybe it's not an issue now. Could be, and this is just hypothetical. Right? Maybe it's not leading to issues right now, but maybe in the future, once you're coming out of the contest prep, I don't think that you want to feel that same way because you're not in a dieting mode anymore. So you're reducing the fiber. However, because those fibrous foods, as I already said earlier, come along with being high voluminous foods as well, you feel way hungrier then. And fighting the hunger, as we know, after a contest prep is super challenging, right? And it's then an either-or situation of like, okay, is my willpower and my mental capacity high enough to withstand from something like overeating, or do I want to continue to feel that way? And for me personally, it then led also to overeating. I don't think that this was the reason why it led to overeating, but I could see that perhaps your stomach is also enlarged because you always filled it up. which then haunted me for a very long time. I just mentioned that. For a very long time, I needed to have those huge portions of meals. And when people are now listening and they can't really fathom what I mean with huge portions, it was ridiculously huge. I'm talking about like bowls that you normally use for like a family gathering of where a salad is then being served or so. Like foods that size, right?
Mixing bowls and things like that.
Or something like, I always did something like pudding oats, where I then abused something like water, xanthan, oats. And that entire thing was like 1,500 to 2,000 grams. And that was one meal. And now imagine that this isn't the only meal throughout the day. And then I had things where I was then eating something like, I don't know, 200 grams of chicken with 750 grams of vegetables alongside with something else. Right? Just imagine that, how much is then sitting in your stomach, which then, of course, isn't being digested immediately. And that at some point, we know that the stomach is then able to and being enlarged. And it takes a long time before it's then shrinking again. So I could see that maybe it's not running into issues right now, but it's worth monitoring for then the future and at least be prepared that this can then lead to hunger signaling like later down the line. Of course, once again, it's all hypothetical. It sounds logical, but that doesn't make it true or so. But I'm also there speaking more so from anecdotal experience as well, how I went through it, what I've experienced in that regard, and maybe there is some truth to it.
I think that's really well said. That's kind of where my apprehension to it was. And I've been saying to Charlotte, like, I don't want to have like diet drinks in the house because I just find it very easy to just have one. And she's like, what's wrong with having one? And I'm like, I don't know. I just don't want to get into this habit where I need this diet drink and where I need to have a pack of chewing gum a day. And I need to have this Jell-O, this sugar-free Jell-O, and have 4 sugar-free fucking Jell-Os. And it's like, there's nothing inherently wrong because it's sweeteners. You know, you're probably not going to too excessive an extent. It's low calories, but I think you just end up feeling, like you said, just really shit. And I don't know if it's kind of, do you want to feel this shit or do you just want to just know that you feel hungry and just accept the hunger? And I personally have got to a position where I'm just like, I think I just want to prefer to accept the hunger than feeling the way that feels. And there's a certain point where you can do all of this stuff and you're just going to feel hungry anyway.
And I think just to add to that, I think if you go down that rabbit hole once, it's very hard to then go back again. It's kind of, what is it called again? I can't even recall. Like Hotel California. You just go in, but you never actually come out again. That's what it is. When you once fight the hunger, you have then a positive connotation. I would even imagine that it's kind of sending out some dopamine signals of like finally satiated again. And then you are trying to replicate that feeling with the next meal and the next meal. And how can I actually kind of recreate that sensation and feeling again? And because of that, you're basically then chasing more and more volume, more and more satiating foods, and that then at some point is leaving you like that, perhaps. So I think if you go down that road once, I think it's very, very hard to then turn back again, especially if you are in a contest prep, if you have that set deadline. Of course, I know that it's not easy to just accept and embrace the hunger, but it's kind of a game of like either or situation, right? Of like, okay, what are the costs to it? What are the consequences? And can I live with those consequences? And what kind of consequences am I willing to take here this time? It's kind of both situations are shitty, but what's the less kind of evil or lesser evil in that situation? And sometimes contest prep just requires certain measures that hopefully you don't do in the off season. And if you can lay that off when you're then transitioning out of it, props to you, cool. Then use that tool. But I see too often that certain behaviors are just like kept in there because the contest prep is so long. And if you then repeat a certain behavior over such a long period of time, it's then of course super, super hard to get rid of it again after 6 months of doing it or so.
Yeah, I think what you highlight there is just how with all of these things like contest prep length, with the amount of fiber you have, the amount of sweeteners you have, whatever it is, within what we're doing here, there's always a sweet spot, and it's about making sure not to drive yourself out of that sweet spot. This is a great point. I can see this where people are abusing almost these low calorie things, this fiber, and their prep is maybe 6 months long or longer than that or something. And then it just becomes an ingrained habit. And then their post show is just like, oh, I should go back to normal. And then it's like, poof, they just get an onslaught of just like high calorie foods and they go wild. You need to transition into this, transition out, especially if you've gone that deep, I think.
So in the last episode, we've talked about like the common theme or the common phenomenons I've seen and observed that led to binge eating behavior. And most of the time there was like a palatable food, right? Especially when it's in your life. It's a kind of normal thing in your life and you need it to feel good, which could actually then stem from your childhood still, that it was like always ingrained that you got this as celebration of like having good grades in school, so you always have somewhat of a positive connotation to that. That beside the point here, what I wanted to say though is perhaps that people now trying to keep things in, highly palatable things, and make room for that in a contest prep, perhaps this could then also lead to a harder outcome or transition later down the line. Because I feel like whenever you have something highly palatable, the body and especially your brain is craving that the next days more so than if you haven't had that in a very long time. And if you have that habit of having those highly delicious things in there, maybe it makes it then even more likely and harder after prep. Of course, there was someone commenting that if he doesn't have palatable foods in something like a cutting phase, that leads to him overeat. I think it's less common. Could definitely, I could see that, especially when something like a family gathering comes up and then you restrain yourself for such a long time from certain foods, and then you taste that and it's just like overwhelmingly positive, or so kind of fireworks in your brain that are just like shut up. But I also think that statistically speaking, I could imagine that if there was someone taking a look at contest prep competitors who are eating very structured and more so wholesome foods throughout the entire contest prep, that I could imagine that they are less likely to binge and overeat rather than the people who are always still trying to squeeze something sweet in. And we are not just talking about sweets such as having an ice cream or so, but even perhaps something like a Pepsi Max or whatever.
Yeah, it's a difficult one because I've definitely seen both. Like I've seen the people who promote the meal plans, the structure, like not flexible dieting during contest prep, and then post show they're like, yeah, so I've been eating all these cookies and pizza. I just haven't had it for ages, and I was like, the goal's not there anymore, so I just have it. But at the same time, I see your point too, and I think the take home is know yourself and generally transition and don't go like floodgates and try and avoid situations where you're going to be like, don't go post show to an all you can eat buffet. It's just it sounds amazing and I'm sure it's really fun for about an hour, but past that point it's going to feel real bad.
I think that's the problem, that you're already setting some expectations in your head and things that you want to do. Because you've seen it after diets, after photo shoots, after contest prep. How often have I heard, I just wanted to enjoy myself that one time? All right. That very often, like, unfortunately, very often. I would love it to be the person who says, like, sure, enjoy yourself, eat everything that you want, right? And come back, and then we just take it from there. Most of the time, though, unfortunately, that then kickstarts something that is not good. Because if you just understand the most simplistic thing about something like dopamine, then you know what this kicks off in your brain if you have something like that. It is true fireworks. It was the 4th of July now in America. That is what happened in your brain. True fireworks, because it's so rewarding, so palatable, and it is present. You can basically, when you get up the next morning, the smell and the taste is still kind of present in your head. And that's why you're very, very likely to then want to have it again. And that is super hard. So most of the time, the best thing that you can do in this situation is not to have it in the first place. And I know that unfortunately in the day and age now of social media, where everyone is promoting something like be once with yourself, accept yourself the way that you are, just eat the way that you want to, life is too short, etc., etc. It doesn't really make it easy to accept that perhaps restraining from something is a better option than actually going for it. And I've seen it so often, unfortunately, with people who are binging, who think that something is wrong with them if they were to cut out a food, because the common mantra and what everyone is actually talking about on social media in particular is cutting out foods is the bad thing. All right? And I question, like, what is worse? Binge eating for like 6 months straight, or cutting out a trigger food?
Yeah, I think it's one of those where when you're in a place, you have to be in a place to reintroduce.
Yeah. You
can't just, when you're at your weakest, reintroduce the thing. Yeah. You need to, transition there. So I think that's the take home. I think avoid extremes if you can. If you're at an extreme, don't go to the next extreme. Transition yourself to a better middle ground. And if you can, stay around the middle ground most of the time. It's funny you talked about palatable foods. I was saying, I was talking to Charlotte. I was like, man, I need to stop buying these fibre one brownie bars. I just keep eating one every day. It's like I need to eat it every day, like a snack. They're so tasty. And she's like, Steve, this is like less than 100 calories. I'm like, I know, but something feels wrong about eating this. I should be eating an apple or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, at least I've got it sometimes as a tool to remove.
Yeah, I sometimes have the same thoughts, to be honest. So, for example, we've talked about now with my cutting phase, having a bowl of cereals. This is like 400 calories. I could easily have like a proper meal, which then would cause me probably to have like 300 calories less for the entire day, because I don't need as many meals then for the rest of the day or so.
Yeah. How is your, we haven't covered the questions again, but I think hopefully
sorry, guys.
We've ended up
even though we promised it. Oh man, we are liars. Fucking hell.
The question, I covered my question. We haven't, I was going to ask, you last time said you're going to go quite aggressive with your diet now.
Yeah.
How's that going?
It's going well, actually. So I told you, like yesterday in a voice message, that I stepped on the scale for the first time in like 3 weeks. Reason being, I think I talked about it in the past, that I just know that I'm in a caloric deficit with the things that I'm eating because I've done it so often already. So I don't need actually a scale to tell me that I'm losing fast enough, and probably the chances are very slim that I'm losing too fast, because I just know that by the meals that I'm eating, because that is something that I've been eating in the past as well. Nothing has really changed in regards to my activity levels, etc., etc. And then I stepped on the scale like yesterday morning, and it just showed me like 80.1, and I was like, oh, where did this come from? That was actually quite a surprise, and I completely forgot how motivating the scale can be. Of course, it can also be the other way around, that it's demotivating. But I stepped on the scale, was giving me a little bit of a boost of energy, of like, hey, this is great, amazing. Didn't really expect that. So everything is going according to plan. The plan is still to do and continue this up until the beginning of August, then be at around 77 to 78 kilograms. And just first and foremost, enjoy the holiday. And when I'm talking about enjoying the holiday, it's not like buffet or something like that. It's like walking around, going to the beach. So the beach, it's
chilling out.
It's not chilling out. No. That is not me. I can't lie in the sun for like 15 minutes.
No, I guess walking around and chilling out.
Yeah, it's like going to the beach, going into the water with the kids, right? And then leaving again like after an hour or so. But staying active, not lying around.
No, yeah, I can't. I can do the lying around for like half an hour and then I'm like, I need to do something
Tops.
here.
I mean, this is like the maximum amount. I'm getting freaking bored when it comes to that. And also tired when you lie in the sun, like directly in the sun.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right?
I'm going to catch you up on body weight soon. I'm going to be lighter than you.
I know.
Soon enough. We're going to transition. We're going to cross.
That's
you'll
okay,
start gaining.
That is okay. I mean, from a level of leanness, you're already... You caught up on me like 6 years ago.
6 years. Man, I was just thinking, my predicted stage weight, I think at the tops 175 pounds. I think that's probably a bit high. 170, I don't think I'll have to go below 170.
We'll see, right?
But we'll see.
Yeah.
We've come to like a bit of an ending here.
Yeah, I think we can't really cover any kind of questions anymore. I'm sorry, guys.
No, I was trying to. These are all quite large questions.
Terrible people, because we lied directly into your face like last week, and we said that we are not going to talk about us, but cover the questions. And here we are, talking the entire episode once again about us, indirectly though. So very, very deeply sorry. I still hope that you are leaving a like. That you're hitting the subscribe button and that you leave a comment. I think it was one of the first episodes ever where I've seen that there wasn't any kind of thumbs down so far on the Improving Season podcast like last week. Yes.
Oh, wow.
That's great. So maybe we can replicate something like that as well another time. On another note, because this will come out on the 12th, this is 1 week before the enrollment for the minicut movement starts. Now, you can sign up for the waiting list to be notified when exactly it is that we are opening up the enrollment. And so far, the responses have been quite amazing. And thank you very much, guys, for the interest and also the support that so many people are interested in the minicut movement. But because of that, we didn't really expect so many people to be interested in that. We are going to cap it at around 20 people for the first minicut movement. So if you want... And that is like first come, first serve, right? So the first people who are signing up for the minicut movements are the ones who can participate at the first one here this time around. That doesn't mean that you can't ever do a minicut movement, because we are going to do it on a regular basis. But of course, there won't be any kind of crossover. So where when the old minicut movement is still running, we are going to open up a new one. So you probably have to wait a little bit longer. If you want, though, to have the chance of being eligible to participate, go make sure to head over to the minicut movement over on our website, sign up for the waiting list to be the first to know about when we are going to open up the enrollment, and then try to be just fast to sign up.
Yeah, I think we were considering, and maybe in future we can have more than 20. But for the first time, we want to really make sure it runs incredibly well. We want to give those people really due diligence in terms of our time with the Zoom calls and the chat, so everyone feels like they're heard. Yeah. And maybe we always have it only at 20. We'll see how many people we can handle. But 20 is definitely handleable. It's whether or not it can be bigger. So yeah, definitely get on the waiting list. That's the most important thing, because then if you're interested, maybe not now, maybe you will be interested next time or in future when we run them. And they're only going to get better and better. So yeah, definitely get on the waiting list. Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for listening. And I guess I'll speak to you guys very soon. Cheers.
See you guys. It's coming home. So I'm Steve Hall, founder of Revive Stronger and a coach of Revive Stronger.
My name is Pascal. I'm the co-owner of Revive Stronger and also a coach, of course.
Revive Stronger has probably been going solidly for 3 years, roughly about 3 years.
Revive Stronger, to me, it is becoming kind of my child, my foster child. It's the gathering and getting together of like-minded people.
We've been expanding the coaching team, which is helping us help more people. But each coach can only help a certain number of people.
Right now, it's all over the place. We have YouTube, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, but there isn't that community aspect behind that.
And so the next step for us is developing a membership site.
So basically, we want to create a family and a community that is then benefiting from another.
A really cool community for people within our little niche is going to be a website.
They will get early access to our podcast.
You can access us, ask us questions.
The community aspect, we have a forum there. You can ask questions, but also you can log your journey.
There's also going to be courses on there.
Courses, presentations on different topics. Discount of past seminar footage. We will log our journey as well. We'll start vlogging.
We're going to have documentaries.
Our entire athletic journey. Furthermore, they get access to an exercise video library.
The exercises that we love for hypertrophy and maximizing hypertrophy, we're going to go through those in depth, telling you how to execute them.
We kept them concise and also mobile friendly so that you can watch them in between your sets.
I'm super excited to grow this community. The amount of value that we're going to be delivering is huge. And I'd love you to be part of it.
You will get so much out of that.
I'll see you inside.